Hey everybody, I'm Sarah French. Thanks for joining our live stream here. I'm joined by Savannah Levins. And Savannah, you have a really interesting story that's airing tonight at 11. I was really surprised to even hear about it. So tell everybody what story you've been working on.
Yeah, so we're talking about people who have been charged for COVID tests. And Sarah, just when we were preparing for this live stream, you said, people are really being charged for COVID tests? And the answer is yes, several people are. And for those tuning in right now, I'd be curious to hear your stories if you have been charged for a COVID test. I mean, just driving down the street, I've seen signs that say, $70 for a rapid COVID test when they should be free.
Wow. And yeah, like Savannah said, please comment. We can read your comments if you have a specific question or just to tell us what your experience has been like. But so yeah, explain that to me. I mean, because I initially thought they're free. So are they not free for everybody, or what's the deal?
Yes, so they are supposed to be free under the Federal CARES Act. All COVID tests are supposed to be free for people with private insurance, for people with no insurance, for people on Medicare. It should be free for everyone. There have been some loopholes that we've uncovered. That is a big part of the story that's airing tonight at 11 that have allowed some people to be charged.
So what are those loopholes? Why would people be charged?
So
to the 11.
yeah. No. So I mean, at 11, people will learn more about how to appeal these charges. We'll get a little deeper into it, but I can tell you, I mean, some of those loopholes are, the test itself is supposed to be free, right? But these testing sites and offices, doctors' offices that are providing these tests, they can technically charge for things like administrative fees and office fees. So a lot of times if you'll see, COVID tests for $75, that $75 is not for the COVID test. That would be listed as that provider's office fees. So it's really confusing to a lot of people. And honestly, a lot of the healthcare advocates that I've spoken with have said it's kind of predatory, by some of these providers to charge. And the ones who are upfront about it is one thing, but a lot of times they have not been upfront about it. And people go to get a COVID test thinking that it's going to be covered, and then they get a $200 bill in the mail. There was one instance I was speaking with the advocates. They said someone got a $6,000 bill. And sometimes that comes down to the provider giving your insurance company the wrong billing code. So that's happened in a lot of cases. Other cases, technically, another, again, loophole when you're talking about the word technically, COVID tests are covered that are medically necessary. So if someone goes in and says, I don't feel sick, I don't have any symptoms, I just want to go see my mom and dad and I want to make sure, the provider could technically charge you for that visit because it's not medically necessary. So these are all the kind of loopholes that some providers and testing sites are using to charge people. And again, we can see the chat right now. I believe, I don't see any comments yet, but I'd be curious to hear if anyone has had an experience being charged for a COVID test. We'd love to hear your stories. But yeah, Sarah, those are kind of the loopholes that we're digging into tonight.
So from the people that you talked to, I mean, I heard you throw out 75, 200. I mean, what were you hearing from those people? What was the price that was put on the COVID test from the majority of the people that you talked to?
Well, it's crazy. I mean, it ranges from $10 to $6,000 is what I've heard. Our digital producer says that you guys are commenting. We can't see them yet. She's looking into it. But thank you. And please comment your stories. And if we can't see them now, I'll try to go back and answer questions in the stream after. But yeah, Sarah, I mean, and again, hopefully we can get the comments up and see what people have been charged. But I've heard everything from $10 administrative fee to $6,000. And another part of that is also, if your doctor orders follow-up tests, then they can charge for that. Of course, people can say they don't want those follow-up tests, but a lot of times people go in for the COVID test and the doctor will say, well, we're going to test you for strep too. They can be charged for that. So, I mean, there's so much gray area that really the range of what people have been charged is pretty huge.
So how can people appeal this process? I know you said you're going to talk more about that 11, but what can you tell us right now about that?
Yeah, and our digital producer just is messaging us some of the comments since we
I don't know why they're not popping up for us.
Yeah, I don't know, but she just said Dora just commented that she was charged $250 at an urgent care location. Patricia says I was charged $175 at Elevation Church in Huntersville. Kathy Lynn says I was sick and had to get a COVID test before I could get treated. $85 3 times. I have no insurance. So, you see, Sarah, it's not just a set price. It's really a wide range, and it all comes down to the provider and what they charge. And again, these charges are kind of loopholes that the providers are using, saying that that's an admin fee or it's the, testing fee. And they technically can do that as independent providers and testing sites, but they're not being charged for the COVID test because federal law says people cannot be charged for a COVID test. But especially, you remember when COVID tests were so hard to come by, like it was impossible to get an appointment anymore. So people couldn't be picky, they might have had to go to the place that was charging $100, $175, $200 because they couldn't go anywhere else where it might have been free. So that's how a lot of people ended up with bills. And I got sidetracked because we were some of those comments, but your answer, your question of what can people do? So people can appeal this. The first thing you want to do if you are charged for a COVID test is call your insurance company and tell them, because a lot of times, a lot of the cases, it just came down to a simple billing code issue. Like the provider just sent in the wrong billing code. This actually happened with some of our web producers I was talking to tonight doing this story. And it's usually, if that's the problem, it's going to be an instant fix, and that's easy enough. If they are still saying that the provider's charging you, you can file an appeal through your insurance company. And then finally, if that doesn't work, you can file an appeal actually through the state. And Emma, if we could pull up, Emma's our digital producer running this, if we could pull up that number on the screen. So folks in North and South Carolina, any state really, you can call your Department of Insurance and file a complaint/appeal. And I called the North Carolina Department of Insurance. I said, have you had to do this for people? And they said, yes, they've helped several people get full refunds. And hopefully, most of the times it doesn't have to come all the way to that. If you file an appeal with your insurance company, most of the time they'll figure out a way to get it covered because you've got the federal government and the law on your side. But if all else fails, you can go to the Department of Insurance. And our digital producer, Emma, just commented to us as well. Ashley Weber commented, my husband and I went to the same facility, same day. He got a $40 bill and was positive. I was negative and got no bill. That's interesting. And it's really at the discrepancy of the independent, office, the doctor's office, the testing site, which is why, Sarah, we're seeing such a huge range of charges. And so it's sad, but it kind of comes on to the person to call ahead, be upfront, say, am I going to be charged for this? Do you have office fees or admin fees? And you want to believe that most of these testing sites are being clear and transparent and upfront. And I hate to call them predatory because a lot of them need to make money too. A lot of them are small practices. They're not mass testing sites. They're small practices that are paying their own bills. And they do actually have, costs of keeping those people on staff and testing. Right. I think, the issue for these advocates is more so the ones they're the hidden fees. They're the ones that, people are going in and just getting the COVID test thinking it's going to be covered, and they end up with a $300 bill they can't pay in the middle of a pandemic.
So what can they do if they're showing up for COVID testing to make sure they don't get home and get a surprise bill that's completely out of what, they can pay or want to pay for?
Yeah, and really the best thing you can do is ask ahead. If you're booking a COVID test appointment, call ahead and say, look, do you guys have any admin or office fees? The test is supposed to be free. I want to make sure I'm not going to get a surprise charge. And, they'll have to be transparent about it if they do charge for anything. The other thing you can do is just turn down any additional tests. Obviously, do what's best for you medically. Listen to the advice of your doctors. But if they say, do you want to do a strep test as well? If you can't afford it, maybe say no, if you don't think you need it. Because those are where a lot of people were getting tests. They're going in for COVID and the doctors are testing for other things as well, and they can charge for that. So when you're going in for the COVID test, be vigilant, ask questions ahead of time. Don't agree to any additional tests that you don't need. And that's really the best way to go. I mean, in the beginning of the pandemic, this was a lot harder, like we just mentioned. I mean, it was so hard for people to get an appointment anywhere. They just had to kind of grin and bear it. Now, I think my understanding is it's a little easier for people to get appointments, so they can be a little pickier about where they go.
All right. So if people have a question for you specifically, Savannah, they have a story idea, a question about this, how can they get a hold of you?
So my email is the defenders. I was reading something else. My email is slevens@wcnc.com, but you can also email the defenders@wcnc.com. It's 1/4 of my email, the defenders@wcnc.com, but our defenders team is checking that all the time. And this story came out of a viewer email saying, hey, I was charged for a test. We do a lot of stories that come from viewer emails who just have simple questions, and you're not alone in your questions. If you have a question about something, 1,000 other people are probably wondering the same thing. So please email us if you have questions about this, anything else. And then I believe we have a link on this story up there, and we've got more information on how people can file an appeal. And tonight at 11, our story is going to air. You're going to actually hear from the experts, people who have been charged, these advocates, and you'll see more in detail how to go about the appeal process.
Awesome. And of course, Emma, our web producer's saying they can tag you in the comments, and maybe, you can go through and answer some more specific questions if we didn't get to them. But we appreciate you guys joining us. I hope that you all tune in tonight at 11 on WCNC Charlotte, your NBC station, and watch the story that Savannah's been working on. Savannah, always a pleasure talking to you virtually. Good to see you.
Thanks, Sarah.